Good afternoon. Welcome to Collaboration for Innovation, Google Hangout on Air. Today's Hangout is focused on how a Georgia school district is striving for all students, for each of their students, to be college and career ready through a personalized learning approach. I'm Ann Ware, and I serve as the Consortium for School Networking Project Director for Collaboration for Innovation. This is a collaboration between the Consortium for School Networking and the Panasonic Foundation, and I'll serve as your moderator today. This collaborative work between Panasonic Foundation and COSN supports the work of around 15 leadership district teams across our nation. Each of those teams is committed to breaking the links between poverty and race and educational outcomes by working to improve teaching and learning for all students. And today you'll hear Henry talk about each student and also for their teachers. These districts are made up of small districts, medium-sized, and some large districts with associated student populations, and they have two areas that they believe are their main focus: the scaling of Common Core and the associated assessments with effective professional learning communities and through an online community of practice, and increasing student engagement through a digital transformation in a 21st century learning environment. And today you'll hear specifically how this Georgia district is using personalized learning to ensure that each kid is college and career ready. We'll now go to our presenters today. We have Valerie Sue-Smith. She's the Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources with Henry County Schools. Steve Thompson, a Program Administrator for Impact Academy. We'll hear a little bit more about Impact Academy a little bit later. And there are some other district leaders that are there with them. We're going to come back to the screen and go to Steve. Steve, if you'd introduce who's there, then I'll come back and discuss what our topics are for today. Steve?
Thanks, Ann. I'm Steve Thompson. We have, like Ann said, we have Valerie Sue-Smith, and I'll just move the camera around. We're all in the same room. So Valerie Sue-Smith, who is Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources. And then we also have Aaron Schmuel, who is Assistant Superintendent for Learning and Leadership Services. And then hiding behind the camera, and does not want to be in front of the camera, is Karen Perry, and she is a project manager for our Gates Foundation grant.
Fantastic. Well, Steve, I'll go next to the topics that we will generally be talking about today. And these are the kinds of things that we'll hear from Henry today. We'll hear about their school's profile, a little bit about their community and their students and their teachers, about their vision for all students, each student being college and career ready, and how personalized learning is influencing that vision, about the Gates Foundation work that they are involved in and how it is influencing their vision. Some examples of how human resources is continuing. Henry has a history of providing flexibility to school leaders with staffing, and we'll hear a bit more about that today. Examples of personalized learning happening in current schools, and then this vision for personalized learning in a brand new high school that is scheduled to open this fall. So Steve, I'll now turn it back over to y'all, and the slides will be up, and if you'll just let me know when you'd like for the slide to move.
All right, thank you, Ann. So if you'll just go to the next slide. Henry County Schools is a suburban school district in Metro Atlanta. We're just south of the city center, about 35 miles. If you fly into Atlanta, into Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, you're typically flying over our communities. And we have about 50 schools, close to 41,000 students. When we talk about our school district, we really say that we have a story to tell about the changing demographics of our school district over the past 10 or 11 or 12 years. And this slide really shows that shift. We went from, in 2001, to double our population in 2013. And at the time of that growth, we also changed dramatically in the number of students who qualified for free and reduced lunch. And then who came to Henry County really changed a lot. Lots of folks were coming to our school system from around the country, and with them they brought different kinds of backgrounds, different kinds of expectations for what education really is. It's to provide them and how they interact with the educational institutions. And over those years, we've really focused heavily on the growth aspect of that story. And since the recession starting in 2008, we saw a leveling off of our growth in population, and allowed us to really start to think in a very intentional way about what we do to meet the needs of this changing population. Next slide, Ann. Thank you. You want to talk about that?
So in this slide here, you can see some of the things that were pushing us towards thinking about how to better serve the needs of each kid. And we look at the story of our data, you can see out in the upper right-hand corner, that's our graduation right there for the district, and you see it's continuing to rise up. I know most superintendents and district leaders would love to have a curve that trended upward like that, as we went from 72 to 78% graduation rate. But we were also beginning to dig a little bit deeper and say, well, what's the value of a diploma from Henry County Schools? And are we really getting kids ready for life after they leave us? The phrase college and career ready popped up to help us talk about that better. And we decided to start looking at the ACT as a measure of college and career readiness. And what you see on that graph on the bottom is you see that Henry County Schools ACT scores have been on a downward trend over the same period of time when our graduation rate has been on an upward trend. And so that started us asking the question, are we really, as we graduate more students, are we really preparing them for what's going to happen when they leave the schools? And it's just giving them a piece of paper that says, you earned 23 credits. Is that sufficient for what we really want to say about kids who leave Henry County Schools? And it's not. That's not what we want. We want to make sure that all of our kids are college and career ready. So we started to peel back the layers of why we were seeing those things happen, what was occurring at our 9 high schools, soon to be 10, what was happening at their feeder pattern schools as well, to say, have we created structures or have we established structures that are contributing to why students are maybe not being successful? And so we started looking at how flexibility can play a role in that, about how personalized learning and the language of that can play a role in that, and begin to say, let's define things a little bit differently about what the school experience needs to be for kids. Because what we began to recognize very, very cleanly was that if only 78% of our kids are graduating on time, and of those 78% of those kids, they're not performing well, then clearly the model that we've been trying to force kids through isn't meeting the needs of all of our kids. We know that at least 22% we're not meeting their needs because they're not graduating on time, but we actually believe that it's a lot deeper than that, and so we've walked down the path of personalized learning. And about the same time that we were thinking about what was the causes, what were the root causes of that, and what were solutions to that, the Gates Foundation put out a Next Generation Challenge for us and other districts across the country to say, how can personalized learning take hold in a district? The Gates Foundation had a significant amount of research and time looking at small schools and high schools and really giving next-gen funding and support to individual schools, but not at the district perspective. And so that work kind of dovetailed exactly with where we were as a district, thinking about what it would mean to be a charter district in the state of Georgia, and what would it mean for us to give principals and teachers and parents some autonomy to be able to think about how do we design school differently. And so we started down this path of personalized learning. And we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so we started by really very plainly talking about our motto, which is ensuring success for each student. And that motto is very important to us, and it speaks very deeply to the idea that one size can't fit all. In fact, that one size doesn't fit any. And this motto has been in place in our district since 2005. And it started with us talking about a space where we have a college and career academy now. And that really started in 2005, where we were able to send kids from all of our high schools to get access to dual enrollment coursework, to get access to CTE coursework that they might not have access to in their home schools, as well as advanced placement coursework or articulated credits for all of our kids across our district. And we had those opportunities for very exceptional kids, but not as a course of study that we would provide for all of our kids. And so we started to say, okay, we can do that at the academy, and we can do that kind of piecemeal along the way. how do we make that happen across our district? Personalized learning was our answer. We can go to the next slide. So we built that into our strategic plan. Our school board adopted our strategic plan, saying that we would move forward intentionally and purposefully towards making personalized learning a part of the way that we do business in Henry County schools. And so it's not about it being a pilot where we're like, oh, we think this is a good idea and it might work. It's really about us saying very intentionally, we believe personalized learning is the right way to make it work for every single child. We are going to move forward intentionally in how we roll that out into our schools, but we're going to roll it out in all of our schools in a very purposeful, measured, and thoughtful way that can provide appropriate supports so that schools can be successful as they look at how to provide for the needs of kids. Next slide. And so this slide is what our vision of personalized learning is all about. And it's built on these 5 tenets. And you can see that we are taking advantage of school autonomy as a foundation to be able to build these 5 tenets that help meet the needs of all of our kids. And we think it starts with this idea of the learner profile, where we know about kids, we know who they are, we know how they learn, we know when they learn things, we know when they don't learn things. And all of that data, as well as some social emotional background data, some attendance, some discipline, all of that is held in a common place that is available to all teachers who have impact on a child, all administrators, as well as to the children themselves and to the teacher, the parents of those kids. And that very transparent. Currently, schools have a lot of information about kids. Parents have a lot of information about kids, and that only ever gets shared if there's a crisis that happens that causes a parent conference. We think all of that needs to be tied together. We also believe that inside that learner profile, there needs to be a personalized learning plan for each student. That personalized learning plan is co-created between the school and the student, where they decide what they're going to do to graduate, what they're going to do when they leave school so that they're college and career ready, and what pathways they need to make to get there. Also embedded in that personalized learning plan is a connection to the competencies that we have defined in the second pillar, where kids demonstrate mastery of competencies, and they demonstrate that mastery regardless of pace, place, or time, and so that we are allowing kids to really look at a math requirement, a math standard that they might have for algebra, and we say if they can demonstrate mastery of that math standard in an algebra class with a test, great, let's give them credit. But if they can also do that same demonstration of mastery through a work-based learning experience that they have, let's give them credit for that as well, because we believe it's about what you learn and demonstrating consistent mastery of those skills and knowledge, and not necessarily about where they learn it or about seat time. And so removing seat time requirements, changing the definition of a Carnegie unit, and creating flexibility for kids to demonstrate mastery is a big part of what we see as this idea of personalized learning, and that kids also have to have the opportunity to be able to move slower if they need to and not be penalized because they're not moving at the arbitrary pace that we've created for them. So if they move quicker, let's move quicker. If they move slower, let them move slower. The other kind of part of that comes into play that you'll see at Impact and some of the other schools where we're doing this work is it also means that kids don't have to be doing the same work at the same time. We have some kids who are, 8th graders taking 9th grade coursework because they're ready for it. We have some kids who are taking 8th grade coursework and maybe going back to a little bit of 7th grade coursework because that's what they need help on in one content area. We also have it set up so that not all kids have to do all 6 courses all at the same time, so they can focus their energies in the places where they feel like they need to focus their energies and then demonstrate mastery. So that flexibility and competency is a really important piece in doing this work. And having that model of competency and flexibility has huge implications on staffing because it means that one teacher may not own the learning for one kid for a set period of time. Instead, the school community owns the learning for that kid. And that changes the way you look at what does it mean to be a teacher, how do you define what teacher is, and how do you move those pieces around to be able to maximize the professional expertise of our teachers, but do it in a way that doesn't fit into a traditional model. That connects to project-based learning, authentic learning, which is our third tenet that you can see there, where we believe kids have to demonstrate mastery. Coming to school to get information is not sufficient any longer. They actually have to demonstrate they know how to use it. We think that's a key skill they need as they go into college and career, because we know that our kids are going to have between 9 and 11 careers as they leave us. So they're going to have to be able to learn new skills and to apply skills, transfer knowledge from one circumstance to another. Project-based learning is where that happens. We think also connected to that is our fourth pillar, the 21st century skills. Those we have we have designated those as the 4 C's, and that's communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. We borrow that from the 21st Century Partnership and a number of other organizations that help kind of coalesce those into something that is both catchy but also really meaningful. We think very positively that if our kids leave us in Henry County schools as good communicators who can work well with others and creatively solve their own problems, then we've put out pretty good citizens that we can be proud of, and that we have to intentionally teach those skills and measure those skills as well. And we don't currently do that very well as a school community or as, I think, public education, because we don't have a multiple choice test that measures it. So we haven't been focusing on it. And we've decided to be intentional in focusing on that. It's interesting, those same skills we want our kids to have of those 4 C's are the same skills we want our principals and our leaders to have, especially when they talk about how are they designing their schools and the human resources they have access to. We want them to be creative. We want them to have some critical thinking as they solve those problems. So we're making it so that those same skills we want kids to have, our leaders are needing to have. And then the last thing that we have on there is tech-enabled. We believe all 4 of these things are really hard to do, and they're almost impossible to do if you don't take advantage of technology tools, whether that's having a platform where the learner profile resides so you can share information cleanly between the parent, the school, and the student, whether that's keeping up with a portfolio of information and data where kids can demonstrate mastery from that, or whether that's just demonstrating 21st century digital citizenship. All of those need technology to be able to do that most effectively, let alone the fact that all of our kids are going to go into careers where technology are a core part of their life. So that's the work that we're doing. That's our vision for this. And what we've done is we've told our schools that they have autonomy to define what they think their school needs to look like as long as they are focusing on these 5 tenets. And that's where the idea of district support, of flexibility with human resources becomes so important, because we're allowing schools to think differently about how they use time and place, not just for when kids learn, but from who they learn from.
So,
go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, one of the things we want to talk about while we're on this slide is we have some proof points within the district where we started down this road over a few years ago. We've talked about Impact Academy, the program that I run, and it is a virtual and blended school program for the school district that serves students from every one of our middle school and high schools that encompasses this idea of personalized learning. We also have, where we have about 450 students involved in that program. We also have a middle school that's went out there and was very brave in moving forward before everybody else, and has done some work towards that is very tech-enabled, heavy, and has started to personalize learning. We have provided programmatically some choice for students with our Career Academy, where students can go and from their regular high school go during the day to another one of our campuses, our Academy campus, to participate in career technology labs that they wouldn't have access at their home school. So we have several of those kinds of things that really are personalizing learning to the student that really were the start of this. We had been working on this for a few years, and then about 10 months ago we started to apply for a grant for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It's Next Gen grant for districts. That grant was targeted towards the 200 largest districts in the country, and we were fortunate enough to be one of the 20 districts they chose for the phase 1 of that grant. And that work with the Gates Foundation over the past several months has really honed our vision, sharpened it, and allowed us to communicate that vision better. And then we have been selected for the next phase of that grant, which is narrowed down to about 6 school districts and 3 programs.
So, Steve, quick question with regards to the Gates grant, because I know that those that are with us today and those that will view this in the future will have an interest in that work. And so, what has been some of the results to date of being involved in that grant work that has helped to influence this personalized learning, every child being college and career ready. A couple of examples for our listeners.
Yeah, I'm going to turn that over to Aaron real quick.
Sure.
So, Ian, I think the biggest benefit of that collaboration with the foundation has been access to other school districts that are thinking about this same problem. Really, it's been a community of practice that we created. Really, I mean, if you're talking about Gates Foundation, people think money, and that's not really been the core work that has been meaningful to us. It's really been about the connections that they've made with the other districts that are doing this work, whether it was the original 20 who were the applicants that came together and shared their thinking about it, or the 6 that have gone through to be in phase 2 of this work. We've created some really strong partnerships with districts around the country that have helped us to think through both what are you guys doing that we can learn from, what questions can you ask, and really that partnership has been really valuable. I think the other thing that the foundation provided for us was language to talk about the problems that we were trying to solve. So that everybody was talking about the same things and doing it with the same understanding of what those things meant. So that when we say learner profile, we're operating from a common understanding of what that means. When we say flexible pace, we're operating from a common understanding of what that means, which means you get closer to solutions that help kids a little bit faster because you're not spending time explaining to everybody what you mean by what you say. You're just trying to make it work for kids. And so that's really been the most valuable contribution I think the foundation has made to our work as we continue to march down the road.
Aaron, one other question is, as many districts like the ones that you've been collaborating with want to get to this spot and move further, we all know the value of building a coalition with your community, with parents and students and teachers. And so what are just 1 or 2 things that Henry has done to help to build that coalition with your community, to include your school board members?
Yeah. So we have been very, very transparent about building this work as a collaborative effort in the community, getting parents involved in task forces that are thinking about the nitty-gritty details about how to roll this out. The school board making it a part of the strategic plan has been a huge step in making sure that everybody understands that this is not the work of one department or one person. And so having them engaged in that discussion with helping us to think through it has been powerful. I think also the big part of getting the community involved in this is our strategy is about having individual schools design what being a personalized learning school means for their community. And so we don't have one model that we're placing on top of every single school. We're saying we have these tenets that we think that are important. We want to make sure you're addressing each of these tenets, but we recognize that each school is going to do that differently based on the needs of the kids that they have, based on the parents that they're serving, based on the faculty that they have in place, and that it's better for us to say, here's the vision, here's the supports that we have, here's some autonomy to make it work, go build a school that works for you. That makes the community jump in as well, because then they get to own that instead of having somebody from a district office walk down the pathway and say, here's this model, make it happen exactly this way. And so we're providing the same supports that I think a district office should supply for those schools, but giving them a lot of autonomy to build it in a way that makes sense for their community. And their community is broadly defined, including parents, business members, students, and their faculties.
So, Aaron, I think that kind of is a segue into the next slide that talks specifically about school autonomies. I'm going to bring this slide up.
Sure.
Give me just a second. Okay.
Yeah, so this slide here talks about how we've just talked about giving schools autonomy in the work that they do, and then the supports that we know the district has to provide in order to help schools be successful in this. So there's some heavy lifting we know the district has to do, things like LMSs and digital curriculum and credentialing and pulling those different design teams to create a community of practice. Those are things the district can manage, whether that's negotiating contracts with vendors, whether that's designing consistent platforms that we can take advantage of economies of scale, and all of those different things that come together from a district perspective. But we know at the same time we've got to give schools autonomy in making some decisions about what that looks and feels like. And so staffing has been one of those spaces where we believe we should give schools autonomy. And we are walking down that road, both from a practical standpoint, very common sense way of thinking about doing this work, as well as from a policy standpoint as well, and thinking about what policies do we have in place as a district that might be hindrances to that. And so it's an interesting way. Henry County has always had a tradition of working with principals to help them to decide what's going to be the best thing that works for their school. But we also are tied very closely to an FTE formula that grants teachers in particular ways. And so there's a little bit of negotiation that always occurs in order to make it work the right way. And so a part of the work that we're doing to support this is looking at a charter district application for our district that would remove a lot of some of the state requirements around how funding is granted. That gives us even more flexibility. But I think we've benefited greatly from having a human resources department that has really focused on making sure that principals have as much autonomy as possible right now. And so that's been invaluable to us to say, maybe I need an extra teacher, or maybe I want 2 teachers and half a counselor, and how we can negotiate that already before we even have a big cumbersome system that makes it really driven by a formula. Having the ability to negotiate in a way that's positive for kids with good reasons has been very valuable for us as we build this. And so I think one thing to point out for districts is you don't have to have everything figured out before you start doing the right work. You don't have to have the perfect policy. You don't have to have the perfect process. You need to have the perfect people that are willing to work together to make it happen. And I think that collaboration between human resources and our principals has been invaluable. And that's something we've had in place as a district as a foundational piece for a long time that makes this work possible.
So, Aaron and team, I was sharing earlier the group of districts, 15 districts that are participating in Collaboration for Innovation. In March, we met at Charlotte-Mecklenburg School System in North Carolina and learned a lot about the fantastic work that's going on there, but specifically around their work around Project Lift, where they are looking differently as to how and what certain staff members do at schools, and even associated with pay, that type of thing. So I know that the group that's with us today, again, and the group that will be listening to this, will want to hear maybe what are some examples of how you've kind of made some shifts to where school leaders have kind of said, I really need to do X, Y, or Z. What kind of flexibility have I got? So are there a couple of examples that you could share with the group?
Well, I guess the main thing really is, the name of the game is flexibility and being willing to work within the resources that we have. You have kind of opposing issues. You have your budget that you have to stay within for staffing, but then you have the desire to be more creative in how we staff. We also have basic non-negotiable requirements that we have to be careful of, such as certification and those types of things. But essentially, I kind of say this flippantly, but I mean it seriously. It's not rocket science. Basically, what we do is we say, here are the minimum requirements that a school has to have, and then here are the other things that we are going to provide to them. They can come in the form of a 2-for-1 trade, 2 paraprofessionals for a teacher allotment. And the paraprofessionals allow for more feet on the ground and more. Somebody asked the question about supporting staff with the management of the classroom. Well, when you have more boots on the ground, then you can help and assist with classroom management. We've also talked about trading in and out media specialist positions, or trading in and out assistant principal positions, and we've been very creative and accommodating is probably the best way to put it, with staffing initiatives and desires that our principals have.
Thank you, Valerie. So this next question, I think, probably goes to Steve. So Steve, with regards to that flexible staffing and kind of boots on the ground approach, what's a couple of examples where there have been adjustments at the school level with regards to staffing and the results of that, of what it looks like for teaching and learning?
So, I think one of the things that the way we look at, and Valerie can speak to this too, but the way we look at human resources and how we apply those human resources is that we have, like she just said, we have a lot of flexibility embedded in our system. It's just now that we have this vision for personalized learning, schools have then started to ask for that flexibility when they haven't asked for that very much in the past. And so things like I need someone to help facilitate project-based learning in our schools, so can I have flexibility in a staff member working half-time to do that work? And so I can switch around to other staff members to cover the requirements of teaching students, but then this staff member is both working with students and with teachers to facilitate this, hard work that is really great work. So we have that, and then I think Valerie talked about switching, doing some what she calls, I think, horse trading, about a media specialist. We want an additional media specialist to do some more of this project-based learning stuff, and personalized learning, and then switching those students out. But I think Aaron also has some examples.
One of the examples we have is at Locust Grove Middle School, where they have implemented a blended learning model. That's a station rotation model as well as a lab rotation model. They have a number of different iterations of what that looks like. One of the things they've done is they've created a computer lab with 75 computers in it, and they've taken a teacher position, put 2 parapros in there, and so they manage those 75 kids. What that does is they have the same allocation, but when those kids leave that lab and go to their classes, because there are 75 kids in one space, the class size is about 15 or 18 to 1 when they go to their face-to-face instruction. And so we've reduced class size for those kids through this lab rotation or station rotation model with a very, very minor tweak to the human resources. In the past, you might have said, oh, we can only do that if we hire 3 more people. But now, instead of having to hire 3 more teachers, we've reduced class size for a portion of the day just by using the current resources that we have in more creative ways. And so what we've established is a really positive school climate where they're learning differently, but they released kind of this idea that in order for a kid to learn, a teacher has to say it. And once you get rid of that idea, it allows you to open up your sense of how you can use the people that you have in your building. The other side of that is also changing the perception of teacher as, keeper of kids, and making it rather that teacher is, facilitator of learning. And so facilitation of learning looks like isn't time bound, and so staffing becomes flexible not only in trading out one person for another, but in what is the work that a teacher is doing during the day. Is it, for a long time, people thought if I wasn't standing in front of kids, I wasn't doing the work of a teacher. Well, anybody who's a good teacher knows that there's a whole lot more to being a good teacher than just the time that you spend standing in front of kids. And so opening up those doors to be able to define what that means is also a staffing flexibility that makes it so that instead of worrying about just management, we're actually worrying about learning, and it changes the way that teachers think about their work and the way principals think about how they use the people in their building. Go ahead.
That's a good point, too, is that we can be flexible all day long, but if the right people aren't in those positions and aren't ready, again, the question came up about management of the classroom and having autonomy with learning paths. If we don't have teachers and staff members that are ready and willing to embrace that, then that's not going to work. So being flexible isn't the only answer. It's getting the right people in the right places.
Sure. And Valerie, what went to the entire Henry team, it really speaks to this school community owning kids, and there's lots of people that are involved in that community space, in the actual school itself. So before we finish up today, we'd really like to hear a little bit about this vision for the new high school that's opening in the fall, and how that may be a little different than what high schools have been in the past. And I know I've talked with Steve a little bit about it, and I know that our audience would love to hear about the vision for the new high school and how will kids really maximize personalized learning there.
So we are opening Hampton High School this fall, and everything about the way that we've opened that school has been different to this point. We have given that principal a little bit more autonomy over selections, from the furniture in the building to being a one-to-one school for our district, to really thinking differently about the curriculum materials that they use, thinking about time and space, to thinking about hiring practices, while still maintaining the same rules and processes that we had in the past, but just being intentionally being more flexible in the way that looks. And so when kids come to Hampton High School next year, it is going to look different, both in the furniture that's in the room, but also in the way that people use time. The model currently is built around the idea that kids will have kind of workstation periods where they have a couple hours in the morning and a couple hours in the afternoon where they have workstations, and then they have some flex time in the middle of the day where they're able to do some instructional focus that's either mandated for them or that is choice for them based on what criteria they meet. You know, there are some kids who we give them choice, they'll choose to do nothing. Well, that's not an option. But there are also lots of kids who, if you give them choice, they choose to do a lot more than we ever thought they would. And so we know that more kids, when you give them control over their learning, choose to do more than what we expect of them when you actually give them authentic choice versus, you know, you can do project A or project B. Kids know really quickly that's not really a choice. But when you say, you know, you can do math today, but if you don't want to do math until next Friday, as long as you get it done, you can do that. Kids, once they learn what that means and how to manage time, they really take advantage of that and roll with it. And so that's really what Hampton High School is going to look like, is it's going to be a place where kids are getting instruction, whether it's face-to-face, they're going to have some blended learning models as well, but they're also going to have a lot of control over deciding when they learn what they learn. And so there's going to be some flux to that is a little bit scary because when you think about having 800 14 to 16-year-olds in a building and not having a bell ringing telling them when to walk, you know, you could be afraid that they're not going to do the right things. But it's really about having them own the school community themselves and really saying to them, this is what you need to learn to demonstrate mastery. Let's figure out how to get you to learn it in the best way that works for you. Instead of saying, this is what we want you to do, we hope you learn. And so we have created a space where mastery is at the focus and learning is at the focus, and time is a resource that we use flexibly. Where traditional high schools mandate time and they mete out time and they hope that kids learn within the time that they give them.
So Aaron, one of the questions there and to the Henry team that we've heard from our listeners today is, so as you're looking at this personalized learning space opening in a new high school soon, what does the professional learning look like for teachers that are going to either have already made the shift or they will be making the shift?
You stumped Steve. He didn't want to answer that one. Being very candid, some of it is about teaching teachers to be flexible and giving permission. And there's not a lot of training that you need to be able to give permission, but there's a lot of times you have to repeat that you can give them permission to be able to look at things differently and for them to believe that that's okay. We are doing a week-long summer institute for those teachers who are coming together for that. And so they are going to get a week of kind of talking about what that looks like. But a lot of it has come down to really saying to those teachers, which is a little different in the high school model, you're responsible for these 150 kids. You're the 4 teachers that own these kids. Make it happen. And kind of getting out of the way and really trusting the professionalism and trusting the knowledge that those teachers bring to the table to say, here's the bar, use the skills that you have to be able to get kids to over that bar, and we'll remove any barriers that are in the way and provide any supports that we can. So that model is one that they're putting in place there to create kind of small academies, or there's some language that we have that like learning cafes and things like that that they've created so that they can move forward in the right ways for those kids, while still making sure that we're hitting all the required, you know, components of any single course or all the required learning pieces that we want them to have. And so there is also continued. It's really important, we think, to have professional learning communities, you know, PLCs built into the framework of what's going on, because you can do a lot of front-end work and talk about what it's gonna be like or what you think it's gonna look like, but until you're on the ground doing it and then responding to what happens when you're doing it, you're not actually changing practice. And so we'll do a little bit of front end to think about, let's plan for it, but then also having a lot of flexibility to be able to say, how do we make this work with the kids that we have, with the teachers that we have, and making sure that they can figure that out along the way. And so there are reflection points that they have built in where they say, let's talk about how it worked this week. What's good, what's bad, how do we shift it? And that's more the on-the-job, job-embedded professional learning that's, I think, more valuable for those teachers and for those kids than necessarily any front-end loading that we could do to get there. Because until they're doing the work and understanding who the kids are in front of them, it's not going to happen. Of course, that's easy for us to say because we know we've put really experienced, high-quality teachers in that school as well starting. So they're coming in with some really strong background knowledge. So that helps in that particular building to know that they're coming in as good, solid teachers. So hiring was important, but then also giving them the autonomy to be the professionals that we know that they are.
Fantastic.
And, if I can expand on that just for a minute.
Sure.
The other thing that we really focused on was the shift in the mindset of the leadership in the building. And so we know through experience and through research that a school reform really rises or falls upon the leadership in the building. And so part of the Gates work we've done is to allow our school principals to see other places that are doing this type of work, and then asking them and their teachers to think about what are those self-imposed barriers that we put up this is the way school's always been, and start to question those, because many of those are self-imposed. And we have a lot of flexibility, we just have never given it to ourselves. So, and that leads to the starting discussions that we've had so far that leads to this deeper professional learning related to personalized learning.
Well, just listening today, it's obvious that you're very much committed to every child being successful. Excuse me, each child being successful. And to do that, you've opened the doors for flexibility, not only for students, but for teachers and for your leaders, and setting your leaders and your teachers up for success. What we'd like to do now, because I want to make sure that the audience can see the video that shares this vision for professionalized learning. To our audience today that's with us on Google Hangout on Air, the Henry leaders have agreed to further answer your questions in our community of practice for 1 month. And so if there are additional questions, then please put them in the community of practice, and we'll make sure that they get answered. And so Steve and Aaron and I think it's Karen?
He's over here.
And to Valerie, thank you so much for your insights today. It's just really incredible work. And what I'm going to do now is see if I can't make a smooth transition to your video. 1 second.
Thanks.
My name is Lauren, and I'm a student in Henry County Schools. My school is so cool. It is not like other schools. I work on real-world projects, work that matters. I get to use my computer to help me get work done, and I get more time with my teachers in small groups.
I'm Darius, and I love my school because I get to show teachers what I already know and keep on moving. I really hate sitting around listening to stuff I already know and waiting on other kids. If I ever get stuck, I have the flexibility to get help when I need it. My teachers call it personalized learning.
My students are working at to see them so engaged. Students who are ready to move on, while providing more opportunities for students who need longer, more individualized attention without worrying about lesson plans. I actually have more time to do what I do best, make sure the kids are learning.
You know, as a parent, I can't believe how active my son is in school. I've never seen anything like it. He takes responsibility for his work, and he's proud of what he creates. He gets the same satisfaction in school that I do completing a big project at work. With the Learning Profile and Parent Portal, I know more about him in school than I ever did. I really love where this is headed.
Personalized learning is awesome. I'm learning so much great stuff in school, like how to design and experiment. The cool thing is that we actually get to solve real-world problems with those experiments. I get to do group work when it helps and move at my own pace when it helps. I feel like I am in control of my learning.
I'm great at writing, so this year I have a blog where I lead discussions about protecting the environment. My teacher even gave me an A for it. It's great to get school credit for creating stuff I care about. I always know what I have to do to move on.
Teaching in Henry County makes me proud of our schools and our students. We have a community of learners and creators who are equipped with the skills they need to be ready for challenging colleges and careers in the 21st century. I can't wait to watch them change the world.